I'm so close to rebuilding the $6 million Bugatti Chiron Sport. But there's one thing now that's really slowing us down. I can't believe that's how it comes. Body panels. Since Bugatti decided early on they wasn't going to sell us any parts for this car.
Picture this, a $3.6 million hypercar, one of only 60 ever built, crashed and bought back from a salvage auction by an owner who refused to let it die. He brought in Mat Armstrong, a YouTube mechanic famous for reviving impossible builds, but Bugatti blacklisted the car, cutting off every part on the planet. Furious, the owner gave the company a 24-hour ultimatum: lift it, or he starts 3D printing the parts himself. What happened next? Nobody expected. Bugatti CEO Mate Rimac slid into his DMs, mid-argument. Let's break down how this became a global story about who really owns a car. The crash and the comeback. If you spend any time in car YouTube, you already know the name Mat Armstrong. He's the UK mechanic and content creator who's built a reputation on doing the thing everyone else says is impossible. Pulling wrecked, written off, this should be a parts car vehicles back from the dead.
Bugatti service and so on. Am I really paying for the engineering, the work needed to do the repair, and the parts?
Porsches, McLarens, you name it. If it's broken and beautiful, there's a good chance Armstrong's crew has had their hands on it. So when a friend in Miami called him with a problem, it probably didn't feel like a big deal at first. Just another rebuild. Except this time, the car in question wasn't a Porsche. It was a Bugatti Chiron Sport. Let that sink in for a second, because the Sport isn't just a Bugatti. Only 60 of these were ever built. 60 total, on the entire planet. When new, this thing carried a price tag north of $3.6 million, and that's before options, before customization, before any of the usual ways hypercar buyers manage to make an already absurd number even more absurd. This is a car engineered by a team of people who think of 1,000 horsepower as a starting point, not a finish line. Now picture that car, crashed. Not scratched, crashed. Damaged badly enough that the insurance company looked at it, ran the numbers, and declared it a total loss. In the used car world, that usually means the story ends there. The car gets parted out, or it disappears into a private collection as a shell, or, worst case, it gets crushed.
So now I've got to figure out where all these parts come from, and after that, we can figure out it's worth anywhere near the price Bugatti is.
But the owner, a Miami-based enthusiast who goes by Alex Gonzalez online, wasn't ready to let that happen. Instead of walking away with an insurance check, he did something a lot of people wouldn't have the stomach or the funds for. He bought the car back, straight out of the salvage auction, wrecked, broken, and officially retired by the insurance company, but still his. And that's where Armstrong comes in. Gonzalez needed someone who actually had the skill, and honestly the nerve, to take on a rebuild like this. Most shops wouldn't touch it. Most mechanics, however good, have never even seen the underside of a Chiron, let alone rebuilt one. Armstrong, ever the guy who can't say no to an impossible project, said yes. At the start, this looked like it was going to be a story about mechanical skill, about patience, about problem solving, about the sheer engineering puzzle of putting a hypercar back together one bolt at a time. And in a way, it still is that story. But what nobody fully appreciated at the start was just how much of this rebuild wasn't going to be a mechanical problem at all.
All the interior is stripped out of the Bugatti Chiron. This is the part that matters. If we can get this car running to temperature, it would almost be mechanically sound.
It was going to be a political one. Because as Armstrong's team got deeper into the teardown, they didn't just find bent panels and broken glass. They found something worse. What looked at first like a small hairline fracture in the transmission mounts turned out, on closer inspection, to be two significant tears. Real structural damage, the kind that isn't a weekend fix. Suddenly, this wasn't just replace some carbon fiber panels and respray it. This was a car that needed serious, factory-level intervention. And that's exactly the point where this story stopped being about a broken car and started being about whether Bugatti would let anyone fix it at all. The Bugatti VIN blacklist explained. Here's something most people don't know until they're deep into hypercar culture. Manufacturers can, and sometimes do, blacklist a car's VIN. If you're not familiar with the term, a VIN, vehicle identification number,
VIN number of our vehicle.
Well, if you're not familiar, that VIN number is a unique code that every vehicle has to identify the car's history.
is basically the car's fingerprint. Every part order, every warranty claim, every dealer interaction gets tied back to that number. So when a manufacturer blacklists a VIN, what they're really doing is telling every authorized dealer on the planet, don't sell parts for this car. Not officially, not through normal channels. Full stop. And that's exactly what happened here. Bugatti flagged the Per Sports VIN, which meant that no dealership, not in Europe, not in the US, nowhere, was going to hand over the parts Armstrong's team needed to finish the job. Suspension components, body panels, and especially the transmission parts that had turned out to be so badly damaged. All of it was suddenly off the table. Now, put yourself in Bugatti's shoes for a second, because this isn't as one-sided as it might first sound.
Bugatti Chiron.
And then he had to find a radiator core which matched the Bugatti radiator cores.
A Chiron isn't like a Honda Civic where a slightly imperfect repair just means a squeaky door a few years down the line. This is a car that can do, depending on the variant, north of 260 miles an hour. Every carbon fiber panel, every structural component, is engineered to work in concert with everything around it. If a repair goes wrong, even subtly wrong, the consequences aren't a rattle. They're potentially catastrophic, at speeds most road cars will never see in their entire lifetime. So Bugatti's position was straightforward, at least on paper. We can't verify what happens to this car once it leaves our control, so we're not going to be part of a repair we can't stand behind. From a legal and safety standpoint, that's a defensible position. But here's where it gets messy. Because to a lot of fans watching this unfold, and there were a lot of fans watching this unfold, it didn't look like a careful safety decision.
All the cars come out. A few people, bring out their cars. There's a bit more noise than usual, but this is city life.
It looked like a multi-million-dollar manufacturer essentially telling a customer, we don't care that you paid for this car. We've decided it doesn't get to exist anymore. And in an era where right to repair has become a genuine cultural flashpoint, think about the fights over phones, tractors, game consoles. Watching it play out on a $3 million hypercar hit a nerve that had nothing to do with hypercars at all. Because here's the uncomfortable question underneath all of this. If you can't get parts for something you legally own, do you actually own it? Or are you just renting the privilege of holding the title, for as long as the manufacturer allows it to stay drivable? Armstrong and Gonzalez weren't about to just accept that answer quietly.
First thing I think what everyone's going to want to know is why do you buy it back?
So my first original thought process was that when am I going to have the opportunity to buy my second Bugatti Pure Sport back? I thought that I was just going to crash it, lose it, and never have it back. But there's like a sentimental attachment that I have to the car.
And Gonzalez, in particular, was about to do something that would take this from a niche car forum debate to an actual, honest-to-God viral moment. He was going to threaten to fight Bugatti with a 3D printer. The demon that changed everything. If you want to understand exactly how this story exploded, you need to understand the moment Gonzalez decided he wasn't going to wait around anymore. Frustrated with the blacklist, and with a project that was stalling out because of parts nobody would sell him, Gonzalez posted publicly to his followers. And he didn't post something soft. He gave Bugatti an ultimatum. Lift the blacklist within 24 hours, or he'd start 3D printing the replacement parts himself. Now, most companies would ignore something like that. A random customer's social media post, however dramatic, usually just evaporates into the timeline within a day. But this wasn't a random customer to the internet. This was a viral automotive saga that thousands of people were already following closely, thanks to Armstrong's videos documenting every step of the rebuild. And Bugatti didn't ignore it. Within that 24-hour window, Mate Rimac, the actual CEO of Bugatti, slid directly into Gonzalez's inbox. Not a spokesperson, not a PR team's carefully worded statement. The CEO, personally, on Instagram, opening with a message that read almost exactly like this.
Places in the world with the right equipment to be able to do that.
Bugatti CEO here. Think about that for a second, because it's honestly kind of remarkable. This is the head of a company that builds arguably the most exclusive road cars on the planet, and his opening line to an angry customer reads like a text from a friend, not a corporate crisis management memo. No lawyers CC'd, no per our previous correspondence. Just a guy, direct messaging another guy, in the middle of a public argument that was actively going viral. According to the screenshots Gonzalez later shared, Rimac didn't just say, "No, we won't help." He actually engaged with the substance of the threat. He explained, in plain language, why 3D printing wasn't the miracle fix Gonzalez was hoping for, warning that the gearbox and the carbon fiber monocoque, the structural tub the entire car is built around, had probably taken real damage in the crash, and that those specific parts simply cannot be safely 3D printed. Same story, he said, for the lights and the exterior body panels, not because Bugatti wanted to gatekeep them for the sake of it, but because printed replicas of that complexity, at that level of structural importance, weren't something you could trust your life to. And then came the twist almost nobody expected. Rimac offered to actually help. Not, "We'll sell you the parts and wash our hands of it," but a genuine offer to work with Gonzalez on the most cost-efficient path to a real repair, assuming the tub and gearbox turned out not to need full replacement. Here's the part that makes this whole exchange even more interesting, though. And it's something a lot of viewers picked up on immediately. The Chiron Pure Sport already contains 3D printed components straight from the factory. A titanium exhaust tip, made using additive manufacturing, sits right there on the car as a genuine, factory-approved part. So the irony wasn't lost on anyone. It's not that Bugatti has some blanket objection to 3D printing as a concept. It's that there's a massive difference between printing a titanium tailpipe under factory-controlled conditions and printing a structural gearbox mount in someone's garage and hoping it holds together at 200 miles an hour. For a moment, it looked like this whole saga might actually resolve quietly. A CEO reaching out, a customer feeling heard, a private conversation working itself out behind the scenes. But the internet doesn't really do resolved quietly. Screenshots got shared, clips got cut. And pretty soon, Rimac wasn't just dealing with one frustrated owner in his DMs anymore. He was dealing with a wave of public skepticism about Bugatti's pricing and repair culture as a whole, which meant the private conversation was about to become a very public one. He was dealing with a wave of public skepticism about Bugatti's pricing and repair culture as a whole, which meant the private conversation was about to become a very public one. The truth behind Bugatti's repair costs. Here's something that's been floating around car culture for years, almost like an urban legend passed down at car meets. The idea that owning a Bugatti means routine maintenance can bankrupt a small country. 5-figure oil changes, 6-figure body panels.
And we reached out to them in hopes that they could build us the standard body panels to rebuild this Chiron.
Horror stories so extreme they start to sound less like real invoices and less like actual receipts, and more like folklore. And one number in particular had been repeated so many times that it had basically become gospel online. A single Bugatti headlight, supposedly, costs around 150,000 euros, roughly $174,000. For one headlight. Rimac decided enough was enough. He didn't just respond to Gonzalez privately, he posted a video on Instagram addressing the wider internet directly, tackling the pricing myths head-on. His message was blunt. There's been a lot of talk about Bugatti service, repair, and maintenance costs online. And most of what you hear is simply not true. So let's go through what he actually said, because the real numbers are almost as interesting as the myths. That headlight everyone loves to quote at 150,000 euros, according to Rimac, the real figure is closer to 50,000 euros. Still an eye-watering number for a single headlight, sure. Nobody's arguing Bugatti parts are cheap, but it's roughly a third of what the internet had turned it into. That's the difference between absurdly expensive niche hypercar part and so mythically expensive it doesn't even sound real anymore. One of those is true. The other one just spreads better online, because outrage travels faster than accuracy. And then there's the number that really tells the story here. The original repair quote for Gonzalez's Per Sport. When Bugatti first assessed the damage, the quote reportedly came back at $1.7 million. $1.7 million to repair a car that had already sold new for $3.6 million. Read that twice, because it's wild. Nearly half the value of a brand new hypercar, just to fix one that already existed. But here's the part that raises real questions. Reports suggest Bugatti later brought that number down to under $700,000. Not a small adjustment, not rounding error. A drop of over $1 million, once public pressure and negotiation entered the picture. Now, you can read that a couple of different ways. Maybe the first quote genuinely accounted for worst-case scenario damage assessments and got revised once a clearer picture of the actual repair scope emerged. That's plausible. These are enormously complex machines, and early estimates on catastrophic damage.
The Bugatti has a sort of extended one with carbon fibre, and I dread to think how much this costs. But luckily, there was no damage to the rear of Alex's car.
Are notoriously hard to pin down precisely. Or, less charitably, maybe it says something about how initial quotes on ultra-luxury repairs get built. With plenty of room to come down once someone with a following and a camera starts asking hard questions in public. Either way, Rimac was clear about one more detail that matters here. Because of how complex the Chiron's construction actually is, a full structural repair might require splitting the car in half, quite literally separating the front and rear structure, and reassembling it at Bugatti's own factory in Molsheim, France. That's not something you can do in a well-equipped garage, no matter how talented the mechanic. That's a job that requires the exact jigs, exact tooling, and exact specifications that only exist in one building, in one small town, in eastern France. And worth remembering, buyers of a new Chiron get a 4-year factory service warranty baked into that eye-watering purchase price. Which raises an interesting side note. A lot of these viral horror stories about maintenance costs are describing scenarios that typically wouldn't even apply during the years most owners actually keep the car under warranty. And the headlight and the repair quote aren't the only numbers that had taken on a life of their own online. For years, car forums and comment sections have swapped stories about Bugatti oil changes running into the tens of thousands of dollars, and tire sets priced like a down payment on a house. Some of that is genuinely true. Specialized tires engineered to survive 400 kilometers an hour don't come cheap. And neither does the labor of servicing a quad turbocharged W16 engine.
Bugatti is making this limited number of W16 Mistrals and Bolides plus the very, very last of the W16s
that most mechanics on the planet have never even seen in person, let alone worked on. But plenty of the wildest versions of those numbers had been exaggerated so many times over so many retellings that nobody quoting them anymore had any idea where the original figure even came from. It's the automotive equivalent of a game of telephone, except every round of retelling adds another 0. So where does that leave us? Somewhere in between the myth and the marketing. Bugatti parts are genuinely, legitimately expensive. Nobody's disputing that a headlight at 50,000 euros is still an enormous number by any normal standard. But the version that had gone viral was inflated well past reality, and it took a CEO personally stepping in front of a camera to walk it back down to something resembling the truth. Which brings us to the question this entire saga keeps circling back to, whether anyone involved wants to admit it or not. Who really owns a hypercar? Strip away the carbon fiber, the quad-turbo W16, the eye-watering price tags, and what you're actually left with is a debate that's been quietly building across almost every industry that makes complicated, expensive things. Who gets to decide how something gets fixed once you've bought it? We've seen versions of this fight before. Phone manufacturers who make it deliberately difficult to replace your own battery. Tractor companies whose software locks farmers out of repairing their own equipment. Console makers who'd rather you buy new than crack open the case. Every single time, the manufacturer's argument sounds reasonable on its own. Safety, quality control, protecting the brand, protecting the customer from themselves. And every single time, there's a customer on the other side saying some version of the exact same thing. I paid for this. It's mine. Why do you still get a say in what happens to it? The Bugatti situation just happens to be the most extreme version of that argument, dressed up in $3.6 million of French engineering. It's worth remembering this exact tension has already reshaped entire industries. Farmers fought for years for the legal right to repair their own tractors instead of scheduling an authorized technician for something as simple as a software error code. Regulators in multiple countries have started forcing phone makers to make batteries and screens easier to replace outside official repair channels. Each time, the manufacturer's opening position sounds almost identical. We're not blocking repairs, we're protecting safety and quality. And each time,
So we thought maybe there was a chance we could repair both of those headlights, but that proved a lot harder than we thought.
public pressure has slowly nudged that position toward more openness, not less. Whether hypercars eventually head the same direction, with owners gaining more legal leverage to demand parts and documentation, is genuinely an open question. But the pattern in every other industry suggests that outrage, once it gets loud enough, tends to move the needle eventually. And to be fair to Bugatti here, Because this isn't a simple story of an evil corporation crushing the little guy. There's a legitimate safety argument buried in all of this. A Chiron isn't a status symbol you park in a garage and admire. These things get driven hard by people who bought them specifically because they can do things almost no other road car on Earth can do. If a repair is done incorrectly, and that car ends up on public roads at speeds most cars will never touch, the consequences aren't hypothetical. That's not brand protection dressed up as concern. That's a genuinely defensible position for a manufacturer to hold. But here's the thing that makes this story so compelling, and honestly so human. Bugatti didn't handle this like a faceless corporation hiding behind that argument. They handled it like a CEO who understood, maybe better than his own legal team would have preferred, that in this particular moment, silence was going to cost the brand more than engagement would. Think about how differently this could have played out. Bugatti could have issued a 2-line statement through a PR firm, could have ignored Gonzalez's ultimatum entirely, and let the internet's outrage burn itself out, the way most viral moments eventually do. Instead, Rimac chose to personally DM an angry customer at the height of a public dispute, and then followed that up by posting his own face on camera to publicly correct the record on pricing myths that had nothing directly to do with this one car. That's not the playbook most billion-dollar brands follow. And whether you think it was a genuinely transparent, human response, or a very well-executed piece of reputation management, dressed up as authenticity, either way, it worked. The conversation shifted. Instead of Bugatti abandons customer, the story became Bugatti CEO personally steps in to set the record straight. That's a meaningfully different headline, and Rimac earned it by simply showing up. As for the car itself, as of the most recent updates, Armstrong and Gonzalez are still hoping to get official parts and support, while continuing to explore whatever combination of factory cooperation, careful sourcing, and yes, some 3D printing where it's actually safe, it takes to get this sport back on the road. The story isn't finished, which, if you've been following this saga at all, is honestly exactly what you'd expect, because nothing about rebuilding one of only 60 Bugattis on the planet was ever going to be simple. So here's where we land. A wrecked, one of 60 Bugatti, a mechanic who doesn't know how to quit, a blacklist, a 24-hour ultimatum, and a CEO who chose to show up personally instead of hiding behind a statement. Mat Armstrong is still turning wrenches, Alex Gonzalez is still fighting for his car, and Mate Rimac proved that sometimes the fastest way to control a viral story is to step directly into it. But the real question isn't about Bugatti anymore. It's about all of us. If you can't get parts for something you own, do you really own it? Let me know your take in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want the update when this Chiron finally hits the road. And I'll see you in the next one.